Thank you, Damon. So tonight we are talking about developmental language disorder, okay, which is something that is, I would say, under recognized and underdiagnosed. So it's something that's really important for you just to be aware of. Firstly, we'll just go through the housekeeping rules. So as ever, cameras on or off, I don't mind at all, but please do keep yourself on mute at all times unless you're contributing to the Q&A session at the end where I'll throw open the virtual floor and invite questions. If you have questions as you go and you're anything like me and you think, oh, I might actually forget that, pop them into the chat box as we go. I won't answer them straight away, but I will come to them at the end and review them then. Do come and go as you need. So we've got children at home, frightened dogs because of the fireworks, and cups of tea and all sorts. So please do come and go as you need. Slides will be emailed to you on receipt of your feedback form. So when you fill out your feedback form at the end, which we'll talk to you about, that will have your email address on it and that will unlock your access to the slides. So please don't feel that you need to make too many notes. Apologies if you've heard this a lot. So this actually, incidentally, is the 2-year anniversary of our speech and language webinars. The first one we did was on the 8th of November 2023. And back then, as now, it was hosted by the Reach Out team from our lovely Stronger Practice Hub. Damon, Victoria, Jess and Lisa. We have got Damon and Lisa here. So thank you to them for giving up their evenings and riding along with me on this webinar. Stronger Practice Hub. So back when we started, they were initially funded by the Department for Education, and it was part of the COVID-19 recovery catch-up package. They worked really well and they really benefited a lot of early years practitioners. So actually what's happened is these Stronger Practice Hubs have now evolved and they're kind of like regional networks now, and they're supporting all sorts of early years providers, nurseries, childminders, and they're looking at improving the outcomes in child development, and they're helping close the gap now more specifically between advantaged and disadvantaged children. So there are 18 Stronger Practice Hubs across the UK. This lovely hub is based at the Barn Nursery School over in Greenstead Green. And that's who we are and what we do. One thing that you can all access, and I'm sure you've probably all heard me talk about this a lot over the couple of years now, is the Early Years Evidence Store, which is an online resource where you can check that what you're doing is backed by current evidence. So as I always say, if you're a new practitioner, you're always looking for that knowledge, always looking for that evidence to make sure that you're doing the right thing. If you've been a practitioner for a long time in any career, so I've been doing speech and language therapy now for 20 years, you can get into the habit of just doing it this way because you've always done it that way. But things change and things can change quite dramatically. So actually, if you want to check that what you're doing is backed by current evidence, go and have a look on here. Now, it does cover all the prime areas of learning, but obviously for me, I'm particularly interested in the communication and language section, which gives you a funky little overview. Talks about vocabulary, teaching and modeling language, interactive reading, and there's more below that. That's just how big my screenshot was. And also the ones that I also like is the personal, social and emotional development. So again, things like teaching emotions and feelings and managing them, and social communication. So again, if you're working with neurodivergent children in particular, although it's beneficial to all children, that's an area that you might want to check out too. All right, so go and have a little look. Go and see what the hub have to offer. Sign up to the newsletter that you'll get regularly to see what's on offer. If you think, I could do with some input on this and there's nothing listed, do get in touch with the people at the hub. They're all lovely and they can put together a package that will fit your needs, because obviously childcare isn't one size fits all, and we know that, so that we can't possibly offer everything, but they will certainly put something together for you. Here are socials, so please do go and have a little look on there too. All right, so the reason why you're here then, developmental language disorder, or DLD. So what is DLD? So, in a nutshell, DLD is a condition where a child has trouble using and understanding language, but there is no other condition that could cause it. So, it's a real standalone issue. So, there's no autism, there's no hearing loss, there's no global developmental delay, there's no learning difficulty. It purely is just difficulty using and understanding language on its own. Okay. So, some quick facts about DLD. It used to be called SLI. So, it used to be called specific language impairment, but this was changed, and I could see someone nodding. So, somebody, people will be aware of the term SLI, but this was changed in 2017 after an awful lot of consultation and an awful lot of research, mainly spearheaded by an amazing speech and language therapist called Dorothy Bishop, who just said, SLI just isn't a good term, and we much prefer developmental language disorder. Okay, it's a lot more descriptive. There is no known cause, but it can run in families. It's estimated that 1 in 14 people have DLD. Now, that's huge. That's 2 children in every mainstream classroom. So if you think about that, that's actually huge, given that in my time as a speech and language therapist, I've only actually diagnosed 1 child with DLD. Not because I'm scared to diagnose, but that's just what I've found. But actually, it is incredibly underdiagnosed and incredibly sort of unrecognized. It does fall into the umbrella term of neurodiversity. So obviously, as in previous webinars, we know that I'm often talking about neurodiversity. The first things we think of are autism and ADHD, but actually DLD does fall into that umbrella term. So it has a lot of knock-on effects. So it can affect anything to do with language and communication, and actually, making friends, our emotional well-being, listening, learning, all of these things can be affected by having DLD. And often it impacts on a child's behaviour because a child is struggling to understand. And we know that that can have some real behavioural implications. Very often, these children they're referred for an ADHD assessment, but they don't actually meet the criteria for ADHD. And then if they don't encounter a speech and language therapist, they kind of fall into this no man's land of something's wrong, but we don't know what, and they don't have a diagnosis, and we're not really sure what to do. And that's where I think that DLD is something that the more people that are aware of it, the better. So very often it manifests as this behavioural issue. And very often these children, they can hold a conversation, but there's just gaps all over the shop. And actually, people often don't think to call in a speech and language therapist because they think it's behavioural. So how might it look? How might it look in young children? So I've broken this down into several domains, and this is all taken from Speech and Language UK. And it's all from their guide to DLD, which is a big PDF, but it's well worth a read. So I've basically kind of just summarized it here. So in terms of a child's attention and listening, they may appear blank. They may be appearing like they're not listening and not paying attention. So some of those classic behaviors that you see, they might look like they're daydreaming. They might just go and take themselves off and do something else. And this is due largely to the child just having difficulty understanding or processing that spoken language. Thinking then more specifically about their understanding of language, these children are going to have difficulty following instructions. They may go off topic, or they may give you incorrect responses to questions. So you may ask them a question, they may go off on a complete tangent. They might have difficulty listening to and remembering explanations of things. and they always have trouble learning new vocabulary. Vocabulary can be really, really tricky. Now, if you watch carefully with these children, they are often employing strategies such as waiting for other children to act first. They might not understand the instructions, so they're just going to wait and see what the other children do and then just join in with that. They may hijack conversations. If a child is talking and like holding court, basically, and if they're in charge of the conversation and don't let you speak, then they're not going to not understand, are they? So very often you'll get children who will kind of control the conversation at all costs. And that's not necessarily because they're a chatterbox, it's because they don't want you to say anything because then they won't not understand you. Okay. In terms of their spoken language, now this can be tricky in the little ones, okay, because they are acquiring language and there are some immaturities. So again, it's possible that in the same way that I said with autism and ADHD diagnoses, they don't often get made until a child is 6 or 7. You may be compiling the evidence that then takes them forward to get a diagnosis at a later date. But the things that you're looking for that may become apparent in that preschool year, particularly, are things like word finding difficulties. So, again, it's a knock on to that vocabulary. And what you tend to find is a lot of these children will use non-specific words such as stuff, thingy. So they're kind of going, oh, yeah, I went to get the stuff and the thingy was there. So, because actually that still gives you the sentence. And if they kind of point to the stuff and the thingy, they can still communicate their need. But actually, if you really listen carefully, there's a lot of these kind of non-specific words peppered through. They may have a jumbled up word order. So that isn't typical of emergent grammar. So it may just sound a little bit different. So probably you will all be familiar. I don't know, Daddy go work now? So they're forming questions like that. You may have something like Daddy now work go. And you just think, it still gets its message across, but it just doesn't sound typical of typical language development. I hope that makes sense. It just sounds a little bit like something's a little bit different. And the example I've given here is the boy is cutting shapes with his scissors may become something like him doing cuts. So again, it all just sounds a little bit not quite right, even though often they're able to just about get the message across. And there will be difficulty in telling a story, retelling a story, or recounting an incident that may have happened. Whoops. Sorry, just pressed a button. Let's bring it back. There we go. So, forming friendships is another issue. So, these children are very often socially motivated and they really want to be friends. They really want to make friendships and have interactions with other children. But actually, they really struggle due to their language difficulties. They may not know how to initiate a conversation. So I worked with a little lad who would just take a toy and thrust it in another child's face. And that was his way of saying, can we play? But other children aren't always responsive to that. And they're often desperate to have interactions. But because of the language difficulties, it's really, really difficult. So again, it may need you to kind of help in terms of sort of helping those friendships to form and giving them almost little scripts to help them. I think it's really important to have a note on English as an additional language. So if a child has DLD, they're going to be experiencing language difficulties across both languages. So, what you'll have is a speech and language therapist who will carry out an investigation into language development in both languages. So, I've done this before when I used to work in East London. We would often be doing dual language assessments with either an interpreter or a speech and language assistant who is fluent in that language to work out whether if there's only a problem in English as the additional language, but the home language is sound, then we know it's an EAL issue. If there are similar difficulties across both languages, then we know that it's likely to be a DLD. So if you have a child who is struggling in English and it's their second or third language, then you need to be asking the parents whether the child is struggling in their home language too, and feed that back as part of any referral that you make. So that's what you're looking out for. And again, I do appreciate that with the littlies, it can be quite difficult. However, if you've got a child where you are on the lookout for this and thinking, something might be going on here, as I've always said, you don't have to wait for a diagnosis to put in the strategies that can help. If you've got kind of little mini alarm bells ringing, then you may as well put the strategies in because you're not going to do any harm and you're only going to benefit the child. And if you don't benefit that child, I can almost guarantee you'll benefit somebody in your setting. So what kind of strategies can we put in place when we think that there might be some kind of expressive or receptive language issue that may or may not turn into DLD in the future? We go back to basics. So I'm hoping that by now, most of you have accessed my earlier webinars. But if not, let's think about the basics that you can go back to. So I got this. This is just a gorgeous, gorgeous slide all about visuals. So visuals are so helpful and often not always for the reasons that we think. So the first thing is visuals are permanent. So spoken words, as soon as I've said it, they go. And we've all been to the doctors, haven't we? And we've got out of the doctors and gone, oh yeah, what did they say about that? As soon as that spoken word is gone, it's gone. Whereas if you've got a lovely leaflet afterwards, happy days. Or if you've jotted something down, happy days. So actually, even as adults, visuals are so helpful to keep that message alive for us. Visuals also allow time for language processing. So these children are going to be taking more time to process spoken language, and visuals can support that. Transitions can often be very, very tricky for children who have DLD or all sorts of neurodivergent conditions. And first and then boards can be very, very helpful. Visuals help children to see what you mean. I mean, that sounds really obvious, but actually a lot of us are visual learners. A lot of us benefit from seeing the thing and go, oh yeah, that's more clear now that you've said it like that. Now that you've shown me, I can picture that much more easily. Think how many times you've done that and you've gone, oh, actually, yeah, that's much better now I've seen it. And it's the same for children. Visuals help build independence. So actually, with the support of visuals, children can become more independent. When they're more independent, they're more confident. When they're more confident, they feel safer. When they're safer, they are going to learn more. So actually, there is such a strong positive effect in improving a child's independence. So visuals are transferable between environments and people. So you can, and I always recommend it, do a set of visuals for nursery or childminder setting, and then the same set at home. Okay, that's really, really powerful. Visuals have no attitude. There's no tone, there's no frustration, there's no disapproval. Okay, no matter how much we try, sometimes we go, just get your coat on, don't we? And we have just a little something in our voice that says we're just having a bit of a day. Okay, visuals don't do that. Visuals are totally impartial. And actually, for a child that probably spends a fair amount of time with people going, just do the thing, that can be really, really nice for children. And they also help to reduce anxiety. It's a lovely safety net, isn't it? It's a lovely safety net to have some visuals up there. I know if I'm not going to understand the spoken language, I can just look at the picture. I feel more relaxed. You've guessed it. I'm more able to learn. I'm more able to interact. So visuals really are key. And they can be pictures, they can be symbols, they can be photos, they can be objects of reference. It really doesn't matter. But anything visual to supplement what you're saying can only benefit children. We go back to waiting, okay? Very, very often we are terrified of a silence, okay? And I have to teach a lot of my parents just to give a child time. I don't know how many times I've heard a parent go, what's this? What's this? Go and tell the lady what this is. Go on, you know what this is, don't you? You know what this is. It's a phone, isn't it? Yes, it's a phone. And I'm like, oh, goodness me. Whereas really we need to be giving children time to think, time to formulate their response. If you imagine potentially that their vocabulary system, rather than being a lovely filing cabinet where it's all in order, someone's come and tipped the filing cabinet all over the floor and they've got to hunt for each word that they need separately. They've got to kind of go through it all. It's going to take a little bit longer. So the best thing you can do is give these children time. Again, thinking about independent responses, so still giving that child that sense of agency, that sense of I can have an effect in my world. Giving choices is super important. Do you want the black currant juice or the orange juice? Do you want water or milk? Those things are just so empowering for these little ones when the rest of life can be a struggle. Wait at least 5 to 10 seconds before repeating or helping. My general rule of thumb is wait till it feels a bit awkward, then count to 5, and then you can jump in. You've got to wait until it feels like, oh, we've been too quiet for too long. That extra 5 seconds can be the difference between getting an answer and not. It sounds obvious, but keep everything simple. Okay, so we've talked in previous webinars about our Gestalt language processes where you actually flip it on its head and you give them whole phrases. Children with DLD, because we know that there won't be, there very likely won't be a Gestalt language element to it, and there's nothing else at play like autism, we go back to those basics of keeping things simple. And by that we mean breaking things down. Breaking your instructions down into short chunks is really important, and giving a child time to process. So it's not get your coats on, get your shoes on, get your hats out of your drawers, and then go and line up at the door because we're going to go out in the garden. It becomes garden time. Get your coat. Wait. Get your hat. Wait. Line up at the door. Let's go. Okay, so you're giving the child time to process everything. Teach vocabulary explicitly. Okay, we know that vocabulary is the biggest indicator for academic success. The better a child's vocabulary is, the better the chance they're going to do well at school. So I went on to the early evidence store and I had a little look at their vocabulary bits and bobs. So with the section here, teaching and modelling vocabulary, it gives a little bit here of the evidence. So again, which is what I've said, there's strong evidence that teaching and modelling vocabulary can have a positive effect on their oral language skills. And explicit vocabulary teaching strategies have been shown to be effective. And then it goes on to give you some videos about, for example, polar animals, musical instruments, painting and drawing sunflowers. So these are just really quick 4-minute, 2-minute, 3-minute videos where you can see how best to teach and model vocabulary in a way that will A, benefit all of the children in your setting, but B, particularly those with a language deficit. So go and have a look there. These things are good. If you want to find out some more about developmental language disorder, this is the website you need to go on first. So RADLD, so Raising Awareness of Developmental Language Disorder. And actually, developmental language disorder is 17th of October. So we had it just a couple of weeks ago, and they were all over socials. You will learn so many beautiful nuggets, and they've got some really lovely fact sheets. So things that I have sort of broken down in this webinar, but these are really good leaflets or fact sheets to send to your parents perhaps. And they are in basically every single language I've ever heard of on the website. I went through and there were languages I actually never even heard of. So these should be accessible to all of your parents. And it talks a little bit about sort of lived experience and just a little bit about their campaign as well. So this website is absolutely full of stuff, and I would highly recommend that you follow them on socials as well, because actually that's where I get a lot of my information. I haven't always got time to read websites and stuff, but I pick up lots of good evidence-based evidence from them. Speech and Language UK, obviously, because they are the Oracle. They've got a lovely section on DLD as well. And then there's this website as well, DLD in Me. So this is another good one. It is American, so there may be a few slight differences, but actually I had a look through this and that had some really nice resources also. This book is lovely. So it's by Elklan, who you may have heard of before, because they, again, are sort of some of the just core people in the speech and language world. So developmental language disorder, I'll help you understand it. So this is really good for parents and practitioners as well. And it just talks about children with DLD. And it's quite affordable as well, £9.99. I think it's quite a good one to have on the shelf just in case. And then this is a slightly more textbooky one, but DLD and Me, supporting children and young people with DLD. So again, it's designed for all of us who are working with children, so speech language therapists, teachers, professionals, and parents. And it's actually got a 12-week program that you can do with children to help sort of, bring them on. So have a little look at that and see whether that would be good for you too. If you've got a child who you think might have, or who gets a diagnosis of DLD, also for other children who might have potential dyslexia or attention difficulties, this is a kid's book called Oscar Finds the Treasure. And he's a really clever otter, but he sometimes finds talking and understanding quite tricky. And so it talks about different strategies that he uses to help him communicate with his friends. So actually, that can be really good. And I think that's another good one for circle time, actually. Just if you're doing some sort of basic sort of disability awareness, that can be a really good one to say, we communicate in different ways, and all these things are quite helpful. So that's DLD in a nutshell. It's quite a quick one tonight because DLD just kind of is what it is. It's one of the more teaching webinars rather than the whole sort of opening a Pandora's box of discussion points. But the next webinar in November, I was going to do auditory processing, and then I thought, you know what, let's do a Christmas webinar. So we're going to do top toys for speech and language development, so that you can then go and buy lots of things. I'm not on commission for any of it. So that's on the 3rd and then repeated again on the 9th of December. So hopefully before we get too far into Christmas party season and you're all out having your mulled wine. And then also I thought for our replay series, so once a month now, we're replaying some of the early webinars because we've collected a lot more of you lovely people over the last 2 years. And I thought actually tis the season for bunged up ears and colds and coughs. So I thought I'd do December's replay webinar on glue ear, because if you've got children with glue ear, now's the time they're going to be suffering with it. So I thought this was a really timely one to do. So please, if you can make time in December. I know it's busy. Have me on in the background while you're wrapping presents. Something like that, keep it nice and informal and listen to me while you're doing that. Um, and join us then. So that's the teaching portion done.